William Shakespeare was born and raised in Stratford-upon-Avon, a small English market town located about 100 miles northwest of London, around the date of April 23, 1564. His actual birth date remains unknown, but is traditionally observed on April 23rd, which is also St. George Day, which is significant because St. George is the patron saint of London. Shakespeare's father, John Shakespeare, was a prominent local citizen who served as an alderman and bailiff, which was an important role in local government at the time. His mother was Mary Arden Shakespeare, the daughter of an affluent landowning farmer. William was the third and eldest surviving son of the Shakespeare's 8 children, only 5 of whom survived to adulthood. Though some ill-informed biographers have depicted Shakespeare as poor and uneducated, that really wasn't the case. By the age of 4, William was sent to petty school, which was run by a local housewife. Here, William's education consisted of being taught lessons in behavior, manners, and the catechism. By the age of 7, William was enrolled at the King's New School in Stratford, a grammar school run for the benefit of the sons of civil servants like John Shakespeare. Classes started at dawn and were held 6 days a week. Boys studied the alphabet, then moved on to the Book of Common Prayer, and by the age of 8 began instruction in Latin. William studied works of great classical authors and dramatists such as Ovid, Virgil, and more. In 1577, at the age of 14, William was withdrawn from school due to his father's financial problems. Shakespeare's daily activities after he left school and before he re-emerged as a professional actor in the late 1580s are impossible to trace. Suggestions that he might have worked as a schoolmaster, lawyer, or glover with his father and brother, Gilbert, are all plausible. So too is the argument that Shakespeare studied intensely to become a master at his literary craft and honed his acting skills while traveling and visiting playhouses outside of Stratford. But it is from this period, known as the Lost Years, that we obtain one vital piece of information about Shakespeare. He married a pregnant orphan named Anne Hathaway.
And I would do anything for love.
On November 28, 1582, Shakespeare married Miss Anne Hathaway. At this time, she would have been 26 and William 18, a considerable age difference. It is apparent that Anne had become pregnant prior to their marriage, which was the cause for Shakespeare's hasty proposal. Back then, the intention to marry had to be announced in the church 3 times on 3 consecutive Sundays. This allowed time for any objections to be raised or pre-contracts to be discovered. Any marriage not published beforehand was considered illegal. An alternative, faster route to legalizing a marriage required a marriage bond, which was acted as security and proof to a bishop that the issue of a marriage license was lawful with a sworn statement that there were no pre-contracts. When it came time to the wedding date, records were obtained by the minister, and flaws were found within the contract. The recordings in the Episcopal showed that William Shakespeare wanted to marry a girl named Anne. This is where the confusion begins, because the documents apparently refer to 2 women, Anne Whately of Temple Grafton and Anne Hathaway of Stratford. The interpretation of these documents had led to all sorts of speculation. Was Shakespeare involved with 2 women, both called by the same first name? Did he intend to marry Miss Whately, but as soon as the license was issued, did Miss Hathaway intervene saying she was pregnant? Did he really love Miss Whately, but was forced to marry Miss Hathaway due to her pregnancy? Or was the name simply entered incorrectly on the first document? Because of this confusion, speculation began that the marriage proposal between Shakespeare and Hathaway was unlawful. So 2 neighbors of Hathaway posted bond ensuring that no legal impediments existed to the union. William Shakespeare and Anne Hathaway were granted a marriage license by the Bishop of Worcester.
1582 to 1592 are known as the Second Lost Years. This is the second period of several years in which little is known of William's whereabouts or affairs. There is very little evidence to justify what he did, and much is purely speculation. It is assumed during this time William left his young family in Stratford and traveled alone to London to begin an acting career. The only thing known for sure of Shakespeare's life during this time is he began having children with Anne. He was a family man, and so undoubtedly he felt responsibilities to his family. William and Anne most likely lived in John's home on Henley Street. Some theories of his motive to leave and activity during this time period include helping his father with the family business of leathers and grains during a very financially and personally difficult time. John had been removed from the Board of Aldermen in 1586 and received many summons to the courts and was ordered to pay many fines due to extreme debt and the prolonged effect of extenuating family circumstances such as his young daughter's death, as well as issues dealing with the infamous Roman Catholic versus Protestant Church of England of this time period. He may also have taken a job as a law clerk, schoolmaster, or scribe during this time to help support the family he and his wife were starting. Another possibility is that William traveled to Italy during these years. Possibly he was a sailor or soldier for England. They were being threatened by Spain throughout this time span. Possibly an issue that arose against William when he was caught in the middle of a scandal concerning a stolen deer made him flee. Many of these theories were formed primarily off the fact that in order to write all of his plays, William would have needed an extensive knowledge of law, astronomy, the sea, and Italy. Perhaps he spent 10 years as a hermit studying all of these subjects. We will never truly know. We do know William was in Stratford in 1589, however. He was named in a civil suit report along with his parents concerning an issue with a neighbor. It has also been derived that by 1592, William had well begun his acting career in London. Robert Greene wrote of William in his book Groat's Worth of Wit, describing Shakespeare as, quote, an upstart crow. It was very common for acting troupes to come to Stratford as entertainment, like a modern-day traveling circus. It is a high probability that Shakespeare met the renowned English actor and dancer Will Kemp during one of these shows, and then returned with Will and his troupe to begin his own acting career. Kemp later became one of the original actors to appear in the new playwright's plays. There's also a possibility William Shakespeare joined an acting company in London known as the Strangest Men during his years as an actor. Some evidence supports William as becoming a part of the prestigious Queen's Men later in his career. All we know for certain today of William Shakespeare during the 1580s and 1590s is that he somehow became famous in London for his acting abilities.
Although Shakespeare was a well-renowned actor, his true passion was obviously writing. His writing career was kick-started by three key factors. First, a criticism written by a jealous Robert Greene allowed Shakespeare's popularity to skyrocket. Second, a brief outbreak of the plague shut down theaters in 1593, which encouraged him to spend more time writing instead of doing so while performing with the Chamberlain's men. Third, he was patronized by the Earl of Southampton, but this is surrounded by a bit of controversy. There has been speculation that these two had a relationship of being more than friends. Shakespeare dedicated one of his first poems to his patron. Venus and Adonis was, quote, a healthily sexual play. Sweaty palmed appreciation of it might be part of the reason why few copies have survived. His writing is commonly broken up into four periods: experimental, establishment, in which he wrote many histories, the apex, which included the most famous tragedies, and the conclusion. In 1598, Francis Marez published a review stating that Shakespeare was the greatest ever. Thanks to him and his review, we know that by this point, William had written at least a dozen plays. The Globe Theatre was then completed in 1599. Many of his plays, including Hamlet, Othello, and Macbeth, premiered there. Shakespearean language made his plays unforgettable and appealing to everyone, despite poor conditions in crowded, open-air theaters. Unlike many authors, he did not use personal experiences. Rather, he acted as an unparalleled observer of the human experience. One of the few exceptions is one of his most famous plays, Hamlet, written in 1601. He had the personal experience of his 11-year-old son's death, Hamnet, which occurred in 1596. This is one possible cause. The other cause being his father's death, which occurred in the same year that he wrote Hamlet. After this, Shakespeare's work began to have a darker tone, with themes such as murder, jealousy, pride, and betrayal. Queen Elizabeth died in 1603 and was replaced by James I, who greatly admired Shakespeare. Shakespeare's troupe then changed its name to the King's Men after James I and performed for the king 11 times in a single year. He would later write his final plays, Henry VIII and Two Noble Kinsmen, in collaboration with John Fletcher, who would replace him in the King's Men.
In 1610, William Shakespeare appears to have retired to Stratford-upon-Avon. He is returning from London. He went to live in London in 1592, where he became rich and famous, though his family was in Stratford-upon-Avon. They bought a new house because they wanted the peaceful countryside and comfort of his family, and his wife, his daughters Judith and Susanna, and granddaughter Elizabeth. In April of 1616, William became ill and died on his 52nd birthday. He was buried in Holy Trinity Church, where his grave can be visited. Written on his tombstone, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be that moves my bones." There is a memorial bust in Stratford-upon-Avon that says, "All that hath writ." He was known to his contemporaries as a great playwright, and generations would remember him. Most of his plays were not published, or if they were published, they were only printed on flimsy sheets for the actors. Only 7 years later, after he died, John Hemming and Henry Candell collected his 36 plays and published them as Mr. William Shakespeare's Comedies, Histories and Tragedies, or a collection known as the First Folio. The First Folio contains Macbeth and Julius Caesar. These discoveries began the cult of Shakespeare. 400 years since his death, Shakespeare has been read, performed, and translated and studied more than any other writer.
Standing in the Hall of Fame.